This week, we're continuing to explore the question, what would you say if somebody said that science disproves God, that you don't need to believe in God because science is disproven? Over the last couple of days, I've talked to you about faith. I've talked to you about how the fact that science itself doesn't say anything, that scientists say things. They make observations, they interpret data, and then they say things, and scientists change their mind. And there are plenty of scientists who follow the Lord. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 3 says, "By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen is not made out of things that are visible." And so today and tomorrow, I want to give you just a couple of different, what we would call arguments for the existence of God. And these are what I would call scientific arguments. So think about it if you were an investigator trying to discover what happened at a crime scene. The perpetrators of the crime may not be there, but there are going to be clues around. You're going to look for fingerprints. You're going to look for things that are shuffled. Maybe you look for a footprint somewhere. And in the same way, you can, it's like if you walk home and nobody's there but your dog, and your shoe is ripped to pieces. There's a pillow that's ripped off all over the place. There's a lamp that's knocked over. Now, you don't have a camera to show that your dog did it, but there's some really good context clues that your dog has been messing around with your stuff in your house. And I believe when you look at the universe, there are context clues that give us pretty strong, at least to me, pretty strong convincing evidence that this did not just happen by chance. And so today, what I want to talk to you about for a few minutes is what we call the fine-tuning of the universe. So we have to have faith that God is the one who created everything, right? That it did not just happen or it did not just exist all the time, but that God created it. And here's one of the reasons that I believe that our universe has a creator, that there's a design with a designer. It's called the fine-tuning of the universe. And the argument is this: there are a lot of you not only have creation, you not only have material things, but behind the material things, there are what seem to be laws that make up how these things work together. Like really ends, one that you would understand, the law of gravity. Okay. So gravity is not a part of the material world. Like you can't go grab gravity, but you can see the effects of gravity. You can measure gravity because gravity is a particular force that acts on something. So are strong nuclear forces, weak nuclear forces, electromagnetism, and on and on and on. Speaking of gravity, this is crazy. When I talk about the fine-tuning of the universe, it's going to start to break your brain. So you probably understand like what a percent is, at least, hopefully you do. So 1% of something, like if you're writing it out, you would write 1%, or if you were writing with a decimal point, you would write 0.01, okay? 0.01 is 1%. And when we talk about the fine-tuning of the universe, let's take the gravitational constant. Okay, the gravitational constant, it could be any number, all right? And this is what affects how things are attracted together or how they expand apart. It's what makes our Earth revolve around the sun. It's what keeps you on the planet. And it's not a matter if the gravitational constant was 1% different, or even like 0.01% different, or even 0.001% different. You need to take a 0.0 and then add 30 zeros. It's between 20 and 30. Like I'm looking at it right now and I gave up counting. 0.0000000 up to like 25 to 30 zeros. If it was off by just a little bit, either way, if it was just the tiniest bit stronger, if gravity was, then stars could not, or the stars would just burst apart, not stay together. They'd be very short-lived. If it was a little bit smaller, there'd be no stars at all. And this goes on and on. So ratio of electrons to protons in the universe. If it was a little bit bigger, there'd be no stars or galaxies. If it was a little bit smaller, there'd be no stars or galaxies. Strong nuclear forces, the things that help hold atoms together. If the way that they were held together was just a little bit stronger, you'd have no hydrogen, no fusion, so therefore no stars or suns. Little bit smaller, you would only have hydrogen and no bigger atoms, no oxygen, no carbon. If the electric forces, like electromagnetism, were the slightest bit stronger, you'd have no chemical bonding. But if they were a little bit smaller, you'd have no chemical bonding. And so I'm kind of speaking in the sense of like, science in the weeds on a quick podcast as you're probably driving to school. Let me give you a quote that kind of sums it up from Fred Hoyle, who was, I believe, a mathematician or physicist. He said, "A common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics, as well as with chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to be so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question." And so what am I ultimately talking about? When I say that I see evidence for the existence of God, I see that not only does stuff exist, but there are laws that govern the way that stuff exists. And if those laws were even the tiniest bit off, stuff wouldn't exist. If gravity were the slightest bit off, you'd either be crushed into the planet or float away from the planet. If the nuclear forces were slightly off, you wouldn't have atoms to make up your body. But you do. And gravity seems to work perfectly to give us the kind of universe that we have. What does this show? To me, this shows there's a designer, because you have a design. And where there's a designer or a design, we should expect that there's a designer. If you walk into a room and everything is put away, everything is neat, and everything is in order, then you would expect somebody came in and did some work. You may not have seen them do it, but you expect that they did some work. And that is what I see when I look at the universe. Somebody's been doing some work. And that somebody, that's God. So this is one argument, the fine-tuning of the universe, that I think is a really good response to somebody if they say, well, how can you believe in God? Because science shows that God doesn't exist. I would say, well, actually, science gives us these incredibly precise calculations for how the universe is held together. And if they were off by, 1/4,000,000th of a percent, the universe wouldn't exist. Our universe is fine-tuned for life and existence. And to me, the fine-tuning shows that there's a designer. So that's what I would say, at least one of the things I would say. I hope that helps you today.